Welcome to Mor-In The Know podcast. I'm your host, Josh Morin, co-founder and vice president of Field Supplements, as well as sobriety, woke, business, and wellness coach. Mor-In The Know delivers an array of content based on marketing, health and fitness, personal branding, addiction, and often goes down the rabbit hole of conspiracy, politics, and the truth. If you seek to better understand the inner workings of human performance, consciousness, and humanity, you have come to the right place. Thank you for tuning in and tagging along. Let's get today's podcast started. What's up? What's happening, everyone? Thank you for joining in. Mor-In The Know, episode number 23. We just reached the halfway point yesterday with episode number 22, but my 15 for 30 with Team House Strong members, Jimmy House and Irving Dominguez. Shout out to those guys. You can find that podcast on my SoundCloud. I wasn't able to get it up on my YouTube quite yet because it's almost 2 hours long, but you can listen to that right now on my SoundCloud. So thank you to those guys for joining in on yesterday's podcast. Do a little quick setting change there. Hopefully that can improve the sound quality. And filming yesterday's podcast just before I get into today's content is I'm really beginning to learn that life is really just a big lesson. It's just a big learning curve, man. And my podcast about baptism by fire and the whole reason for me starting this has just really come to just so much clarity, because now I can see exactly what the words that I'm speaking. You know, I've tried to improve the quality of the podcast each and every single time that I record, and I get better every time. My skill set gets better every time, but the little things, the little details get better as well. So yesterday, we were having some camera problems with the cameras stopping recording. They would stop recording at about 22 minutes, and so we were losing this footage, and we were having this lag yesterday. So we're gonna find a way. We're gonna figure that out, and now we're prepared for that in the future. So thank you guys for bearing with me over the last few weeks, and I am incredibly grateful for all the phenomenal feedback. Today's podcast is titled "Why My Kids Won't Wrestle, but Why Your Kids Should." Now, that's going to sound absolute crazy to most. You're going to be like, Josh, you are a crazy psycho person. Why would you say that you don't want your kids to wrestle, but you're telling me you want my kids to wrestle? Yes, I want your kids to wrestle. I don't want you to coach them, and I'll coach them. That's even better. And this is why. First and foremost, I absolutely love the sport of wrestling. I have to give all my merit for majority of the lessons that I've learned in the person who I am because of the sport of wrestling and what the sport of wrestling has taught me. Dan Gable has a phenomenal quote. I think it's one of the best quotes there is that once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. Everything else after wrestling is easy. And especially if you've wrestled at the highest level, but even if you've wrestled for a club program or a middle school or high school program, you definitely know the principles and the values that wrestling really exudes and that you must have and embody to be a wrestler. But to be a successful wrestler, to be in that top 5, the top 2%, top 1% of people that are succeeding on these levels on state championships, regional championships, national championships, you have to really, man, it's a whole nother level of commitment. And once you reach that level, you begin to understand that everything else outside of the wrestling room is super easy. There's nothing really hard about the real world. There's nothing really hard about working. There's nothing hard about a job. Relationships become easier, and wrestling is one big metaphor for life. And once you have wrestled, everything else in life is easy. And the sport of wrestling has taught me so much about myself, has provided and has given me such incredible in-depth and valuable relationships and lessons into my life with all the ups and downs, all the injuries that have occurred to me, and I am forever grateful. So I just wanted to put that out there first and foremost before I got into today's content, is the sport of wrestling to me has just been an absolute life changer, and it'll always be part of my life. It might not be a big part of my life for the next 20 to 40 years, because in the last 20 years, it's played a huge, substantial role. But I'm going to take those same lessons, those same qualities, and those same morals and ethics that I had for the sport of wrestling, and the work ethic and the knowledge and understanding that I gained from that sport, and I'm going to apply that to the rest of my life. And the reason why I say that my kids aren't going to wrestle, but your kids should, and your kids should be coached by me is this. For me, I want my kids to just simply do whatever they want, and I shouldn't say that I don't want my kids to wrestle. I might at one point, if I ever have children, pre show them present the idea of wrestling to them and let them decide if they like it or not. And if they don't like it, if they don't want to do it, then they don't have to do it. And I'd rather have them play baseball or play golf or play basketball or play a fun sport that they like to play. Because at the end of the day, wrestling to me is fun now. But when you're 6 years old and you miss baseball season and you're looking outside in the springtime and it's 75 degrees in Montana after freezing your butt off all winter long, and all your buddies are outside playing baseball, throwing the baseball around and hitting the ball, and you're stuck in a wrestling room grinding it out and beating the crap out of each other when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, then it's really not that fun of a sport back then. Now I love it. Now it's something that's ingrained in me, and it's really been a hard transition for me to really let go of that inner line and that inner requirement to have, I just like this feeling. I don't know, it's hard to really explain, that physical contact. I really like when somebody slaps me on the back of the neck and I slap them on the back of the neck. That physical contact, I really do like that. It's something inside of me that just really pulls out that inner primal instinct, that inner primal lion in me personally. And I love that feeling. And for your kids growing up, it's a tough thing to really promote because, first off, you don't want to push them too hard. And I won't go into detail, but I was pushed pretty hard, as are a lot of kids. Wrestling has one of the highest attrition rates of any sport. 1 out of every 8 athletes quits wrestling every single year. So in 8 years, if you take 8 kids at 8 years, that means they'll all have quit during that time. So the attrition rate is really, really high. Why? Because it's a very, very hard sport, number one. Number two, I really believe that there's a disconnect between what the parents want and what the kids want. When your kid's 8 to 10 years old, 12 years old, I really feel like the kid is really doing what mom and dad want and not what they truly want. And I think that that's really the big problem with the attrition rate. And then the third part is just the blatant facts, is that it's just a really hard sport. It's a really, really tough sport. And to really succeed now within the sport, people are going to great lengths from when they're 60 years old, 5 years old even, wrestling year-round, wrestling 100 matches a year, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, my thoughts on all of this is that if you are a parent out there and you want to get your kid into the sport of wrestling, I absolutely support that idea. Now, take some advice from me. If you get your kid in the sport of wrestling, step away, drop your ego at the door, and if you have to, dive in to some personal development on your end of things to better your skills as a parent, because you're going to find yourself wanting it more than little Johnny. You may or may not, but maybe they just love it and they love to wrestle. But there's going to be times and challenges where you're going to get upset with little Johnny or little Sarah, or whoever it is that's practicing or wrestling, and you're going to find that you're going to become angry and upset. And I see this a lot, where parents will all of a sudden then start to really harp and get harsh with their kids. I know it. I've been there. I've had a dad like that. And I'm glad that I had some of that tough love in my life, but now learning those lessons, I want to do it completely different. If I was to have a son, or if I'm in a coaching situation, there's a way better way to do it than tough love. Tough love, yeah, it's good, and it provides, but at the end of the day, I really think that there's unconditional love is the answer with all things. But tough love is really condescending. It's two-sided. Tough love is this, well, I'm only harping on you and mad at you because I love it. It's really a passive-aggressive situation. So as a parent, you must begin to step into your own body, drop your own ego, and let Johnny go out there and perform how Johnny wants to perform. And obviously, they're going to perform. Sometimes they're going to perform amazing. Sometimes they're not going to give a crap. And if you find that your athlete, that your son or daughter is going out there and they really don't care about the sport, or they're not giving it their best or giving it their best effort, maybe it's then time to walk away from the sport, and the sport's probably not for them. Let them be a kid and go play in the dirt, play trucks or cars or whatever it is, ride bicycles, ride motorcycles, be in the mountains, go fishing, go hunting, whatever it is that really makes little Johnny or Sarah happy, let them do that, but don't force them into something that they don't want to do. But if your kid does really enjoy wrestling and going out there, the best way for you to support them is to just be that. Just be supportive. Don't use any passive-aggressive techniques on them. Tough love. Throw that away. When they come off the mat, win or lose, you tell them, hey, I liked your effort. Good effort. And you have to have this open and communicating this relationship with them where you don't sit there and harp on them. I remember coming off the mat sometimes, and I would win a match maybe by 10 points, but then I would be told that it wasn't good enough or it wasn't enough. And that's tough on a kid. And even though inside of me, I knew I had more in me, but I didn't need to be told that. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, here's just some pointers and some tips: is your child comes off the mat, you start asking them questions. How do you feel about your performance? And don't be passive aggressive about you asking them. They're asking these questions to them. Simply ask them in a calm, cool, collective manner. And if they lose the match and they start crying, be like, "Hey, no tears, man," or "No tears, girl. Hey, we're here. This is just a game, man. We're here to have fun." And I'm not gonna be that guy like, "Oh, it's just all about fun," because you know what? At the end of the day, it is. It is a sport. It's a grueling sport. And as your child gets older and your child becomes more mature, then they will take on and they will embody that more seriousness. I promise you. A teenager will start to begin to be able to really be critical of themselves. I was my worst critic, and I still am to this day. We are all our worst critics. The last thing that we need is a mom or dad yelling in our face after a match or after a tournament saying that we should have done this, or yelling at us on the way home and this, and this, and this. And then at the end of it saying they're only doing that because they love us. That's not the way. The way is to always have a cool, collected, calm manner when you're teaching or coaching your son and or parenting your kid. Ask them questions. How did you feel about your performance? What do you feel that you could have done better? Where do you feel that you could work on more? What did you gain from this match? What did you gain from this tournament? And start to talk to them. Let them open up. Instead of tell, you ask and let them talk. You let them tell. And by them talking, that allows them to be comfortable with you, communicate with you, so they don't have to go through their whole life just having and being in the car ride home or being at a tournament and just listening to all the things that you have inside of you going like this. One day, you know what? They're going to look back and be like, we had some phenomenal conversations, and you could talk to your 6-year-old. I promise you. 5 and 6-year-olds that are wrestling are incredibly cognitive when you begin to ask them questions. But in parents in general, they just want to tell instead of talk. Instead of talk to them like another human being, they want to have this dominance complex over their children, and that's not the answer. The answer is your kid is cognitive. Treat them like an adult. Treat them like you. I don't baby talk any kids that I coach. I ask them questions. I treat them just like I would treat another adult. Why? Because that's what they are. We got to stop treating kids like we're this dominance. We have this dominance complex over them, and start beginning to treat them like they're just another human being like us, and start asking them questions about the performance, asking them how they feel, asking them what they feel they could have done better in, asking them what they could improve on, asking what they've done great in the match, ask them if they had fun. Ask them about their experience and let them talk. You spend 10 or 20% of the time in the conversation asking questions, and then you keep your mouth shut. You let little Johnny talk. He talks, and I promise you, he will begin to tell you exactly what he needs to tell himself. Why? Because when I start to talk about my performance and I start to really depict some things after a match, and I really have this inner dialogue, and I can speak to my coaches, and I've had some phenomenal coaches over the years that have been this character, like I'm saying, is they've been able to say, hey, what did you feel about your performance? What did you feel you could have done better on? And have this conversation instead of telling. We got to stop telling and start talking, start asking questions to these kids. And the reason why my kids aren't going to wrestle, I'm just kidding. I don't know. My kids can do whatever they want. I want them to be happy, but find yourself a coach that's willing to dive in on the personal development side and treat your kid with the respect that it needs. But once you have a phenomenal coach who's doing all these great things, because I know so many coaches out there that are these great coaches, too many to list. If you have a coach that your child is being coached by and who is incredibly cognitive, who does his personal development, who understands coaching, who understands the minds of children and the minds of people, and is not just a wrestling coach, but is a mentor, who's a philosopher, who's a leader, if that's who your kid's getting coached by, and your kid has the privilege of having this coach in their life, the moment that kid's out of the wrestling room, and the moment that you start pointing and you start to become the dictator and start pointing and saying this, this, and this, guess what? All that hard work that coach is doing behind the closed doors without you there is slowly diminishing. So if you're spending your money and you're spending your time to have your kids coached by these phenomenal people, keep your mouth shut unless you're asking them questions, unless you want to support them. So that's today's Mor-In The Know podcast. Thank you for tuning in and tagging along. Be sure to check me out and stay in the know at Mor-In The Know on Instagram and morintheknow.org. And for all your supplement needs, check out fueledsupplements.com and Fueled Supplements on Instagram. You guys have a beautiful Wednesday.